The Introvert's Edge podcast was designed to create a dialogue around introversion, to stimulate a discussion around our disadvantages, how we overcome those disadvantages, and what we consider our introvert's edge. Together, we're finally going to confront the stigma around introversion, showing that we're not second-class citizens, we're just different, and we need to embrace that.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Introvert's Edge podcast. And I'm ecstatic to welcome our next guest. She is a career coach that served many years at PwC, or for those people that don't know what that stands for, PricewaterhouseCoopers. And she has made really a career out of advising other people on how to promote themselves inside organizations. So if you're listening to this and you are a career professional, and even if you're in lower levels of management and you want to, or you aspire to get one of those top jobs, we're going to be talking about how to do that as an introvert. We're going to be touching on things like personal branding and also making sure that you become visible without sounding braggy at all, because that's the key really. We don't want to sound braggy in anything that we do because that doesn't feel comfortable for us as an introvert. But without further ado, I want to welcome to the show Nital. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me here, Matthew.
Oh, I'm ecstatic to have you. And I think that when I was researching you, all the topics you talk about, some of them feel kind of strange for career professionals to consider, because especially for those people that have done the traditional, go and get a degree, go and get a job, think if they just work hard, people will recognize. And look, I know the world's starting to realize that isn't the way things happen, but getting it known, making sure you're visible and making sure that people actually understand the value that you provide tends to be something that's not really taught, and I love the fact that you're teaching it. So I'd love to start by just really cutting to the crux of things. There's introverts listening all the time to this show that are like, I love the ideas, I love the strategies, but there is no way I'm going to be self-promotional in any way, shape, or form. It just feels braggy. How would you suggest that a career professional that wants to let an organization, the stakeholders, their leader know the impact that they're providing, how would you suggest they do that without coming across as braggy and kind of self-indulgent in a way?
Such a pertinent question right now, Matthew. I have a lot of people talking to me about this exact problem. So the first thing I'd stress is that it's not bragging. So people who are thinking that they are bragging, just remember that if you have had successes and you've had achievements and you're really good at what you do, then you're not bragging. What you're doing is just sharing the value that you're able to bring, that you can bring, and that you want to bring to others. And when you think of it like that, it just really changes your mindset. You're sort of reframing how you're thinking about talking about yourself and what you've done in a way that actually is giving value back to other people. And for people who are extremely humble, it's not easy to do. I definitely know this because I've been exactly the same. There's so many years of my career that I just put my head down and I just worked really hard and just hoped to myself that I get recognized. But as you can imagine, that was not the case at all. But what I started to realize over time is I can't compare myself to the extroverts out there, because that's what I started to do. I started to look around and think, oh, this person is becoming successful and they're doing this and they're speaking up here and they're challenging this person. But what I was doing was just comparing myself to someone who was completely different to me, just wired in a different way. And you can imagine what happened. It just didn't work for me. But once I really dug into my introversion and really started to figure out how to use my introverted qualities to my advantage, so things like active listening, reflection, focus, being creative, that worked wonders for myself and my career. And that's what I really want to help others do, in terms of coming to that realization that they can use their introversion to help them, but just by leaning into it a little bit rather than running away from it. And you talked about, how can they do it in a way that's not bragging? So if they do come across if they're thinking that they're coming across as bragging, I would say just stick to cold, hard facts. Just give really concrete examples about value that you're adding to the organization, your client, your team, anyone. And when you do that, it just becomes a lot more easier. The second thing I'd say is if you have a team, actually talk about what they're doing and raise their profile, because what you're doing is just by raising their profile, you're actually raising yours because you're also responsible for the outcomes that they're getting. And another thing I'd say, and this is sort of a hidden gem way of getting yourself visible and getting yourself noticed by others, and a lot of people probably wouldn't think of it like this, is just to ask for feedback. So normally people would think if I ask for feedback, I'm going to get my negative parts of my career highlighted to me, things I need to improve. But actually that's not the case. You're getting that person to acknowledge the things that you've done well, as well as areas that you need to improve. So you're bringing that to the forefront of their mind. And there are so many other sort of strategies out there. Like I always recommend for people to just get your name on it. So what I mean by that is if there's an idea, a presentation, a report, and you have significantly contributed to it, just make sure your name is included on it. Ask for it to be included because people are going to start noticing that. And then the other thing you can do is just diversify your work portfolio. So just work with different people in the organization, work on different projects if you can, if you have the ability to, and just give yourself more chances to showcase yourself to others. So some strategies might work for some and they may not work for others. But the main thing is just to figure out actually what works for you in your organization. And then really try to just hone in on focusing on those 2 or 3 things that actually make you a bit more visible.
That's great advice. I'm really glad you shared that. I think that a lot of people, though, as they're thinking through this, a lot of them probably feel like they're doing it alone. And I know that you talk frequently about finding resources and support systems within inside corporations. And a lot of people think that they don't exist, but they do. It's just most of them are untapped into. Would you mind just sharing like some of the resources that you found that were helpful for you during your career?
Absolutely. And I obviously worked for an organization that really invested a lot in their people, but you'll find that there's a lot of training and development out there. So if you just speak to HR or just speak to other people around you or your manager, you'll find that there are courses out there, leadership programs, etc., that just help you become just a lot more confident in yourself to be able to get yourself being more visible. And then the other thing I'd say is mentorship programs. So a mentor is someone who's going to advise, guide, and support you throughout whatever work you're doing. And it's a little bit informal, but I've started to see a lot of in mentorship programs that also cross-company. And it's such a fantastic way of just getting more opportunities to speak to more people and just expanding your circle in that way. And then the third one, which I would say is one of the biggest untapped assets, or is just getting yourself a sponsor. And a sponsor is someone who really actively supports your career progression. So what they do is they open doors for you. They say your name in rooms that you're not in. They share your contribution and impact with others as well. And they really help to make sure that when you're not around, that you are visible, that people know exactly what you're bringing to the table.
Yeah, that's great. And for the people that have read my book, I call them champions because you need to have champions within a workplace. However, a lot of people feel that getting those champions to listen to them, to give them the time of day is difficult. And I know that in your mind, it actually is as well. You have to really start by figuring out who you are. And, I see this happen so many times with career professionals. They say, I wish that I had a mentor. I wish that I had somebody supporting me. And then you say, well, what do you think that they should be telling people about? And the answer is, well, everything about me, because I do everything and anything that somebody needs. I'm really resourceful. I'm really hardworking. And there's it's nothing that somebody else wouldn't share as well. So I know you talk about the requirement for personal branding to be visible and the necessity to do that before you start to look for stakeholders or for champions of your work. What would you suggest is the minimum viable product or the minimum requirement for branding to start looking for those champions? And how would you suggest somebody goes about doing that?
So in terms of building a personal brand, it's not something that can be done in days. It's not something that can actually be done in months. It does take a little bit of a time. And it's something that's going to be long term once you have it. And for those of you who want to, your listeners out there who actually are looking to build their personal brand, what I would suggest is there's 3 sort of steps to building their personal brand. And one is around defining it. So it's about thinking, how do you come across to others? How are you perceived by others? What are people saying about you when you're not there? Because that's exactly what a personal brand is. What's that now, and what do you want it to be in the future? So once you start to do that, what I'd suggest to people is just coming up with 5 or 6 different adjectives that actually describe, where they want to go and where they are now. And then the next step is about developing. So this is about developing your action plan in order to get there. And this is about coming up with simple actions to help you achieve that brand. And what I would suggest is, if we think about an example, Matthew, so if we think that someone started their career and they're fairly early on, like 5 or 6 years down the line, and they're known to be a perfectionist, they're known to be very reliable, they spend the time to cross the T's, dot their I's, just make sure that everything is done to a high quality. And they're known for that, and it's great and it's fantastic, and people recommend their work to others, and people are talking about how great they are. But they also know that to get to the next level, they just can't be a perfectionist. They have to move towards becoming more, let's say, outcome orientated. And in order to become more outcome orientated, they need to think about making sure that every task that they do, they're evaluating it based on, is it achieving that outcome? Or is it actually taking them away from it? Is it distracting them from it? And then it's about purging their to-do list to think, okay, let's remove things that are distracting me from it. Let's see if I can delegate things. And then the next part of that personal branding is to evaluate it. Because a personal brand is how you're perceived by others, the best way is to just make sure that you are getting feedback on it, because there are always going to be new people to your organization, and there's different ways you're going to come across to different teams and different leaders. And the best way is to ask people how you're coming across.
I think that's great advice. I think the trouble a lot of people have is actually getting that in front of people. And if they're sitting at in their cubicle, or especially now in our less connected world where we're all a lot of times virtually connecting with people, that makes it much, much harder for them to get that brand in front of people. And so obviously I'm a big fan of networking, and I believe that if we're not networking, our businesses are dying, or so are our careers, right? Because I feel like the only time people network, especially if they're introverted, is when they've just lost their job and now out of desperation they're networking. It's the same with small businesses. When they lose a customer, they're like, oh, now I need to go and find one. And so I'd love for you to share and I mean, you worked with, as you said, a very supportive organization, but you're still a big believer on the importance of networking. For those people that are listening that are trying to avoid networking at all costs, can you help me understand, or help them understand, the importance of continuous networking, not isolated, stressful networking, how important that is for a career, and what you would suggest that they would do to continue networking even while they feel like they're in a safe, cushy job?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, before I go into this, Matthew, I'll actually just refer back to, I was watching the Arnold Schwarzenegger documentary on Netflix a few weeks ago. And one of the things he said in one of the episodes, which really resonated with me, was that people tell him he's a self-made man. But he said, I'm not a self-made man because I've had so much help along the way. And I think this comes back to what we were talking about previously, about having a sponsor, having a mentor, but also that networking gives you the support that you need in order to do what you need to do. So I think just people who struggle with networking, just remember that even someone who's excelled in 3 very different areas in life, whether it's bodybuilding, acting, or politics, he said he couldn't do it alone. And we shouldn't have to do it all alone either when we don't have to. So networking is absolutely crucial. Yeah, it opens up opportunities to you, it helps you grow, and it actually makes your work go further as well. Because let's say you've already built up your network and you've worked on a project that needs more exposure. It's easier for you to get it out there, and it's easier for you to make that project a success. So for those, you talked about the moving away from stressful networking and going towards more continuous and just happy networking. So if people are thinking of networking as, simply networking events, what I would say is, 2 suggestions. Be very, very selective. Especially as an introvert, the last thing you want to do is just waste your time and energy on an event that's not tailored to your industry, your area of expertise, or your audience. So be very selective on how you do that and use your time wisely. And then the second thing I'd say is it all comes down to preparing. And what I mean by that is prepare what questions you're going to ask, who you want to speak to, what icebreaker questions could you talk about just to get the conversation warmed up. And then most importantly, how can you exit the conversation when it's not going where you want to go, or, you've exhausted it. So think about those things. But networking does not just have to be just big events. So networking can happen like anywhere. It can happen in the lift, it can happen in the cafe, it can happen just at your desk as well. So for that, just think about what type of people you want to be connected with, and just take small steps, like especially in this, remote world. Take small steps to connect with them on LinkedIn, send them a message, talk to them about what work they're doing. There's so many little steps you can take that are not scary, but can still move you closer to where you want to go, which is just building a genuine, trusted connection. And introverts, as you know, are just absolutely fantastic at making trusted connections because they focus on the quality rather than the quantity.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice. I also think that people listening to you are going to have trouble believing that you're an introvert, right? Because you're very clearly articulate. You have a series of steps. And while, of course, people probably at home or driving to work listening to this may think to themselves, well, she's probably put a lot of planning and preparation into this. Let's kind of break down some of those barriers, because you did lead a large team. You were involved in a large organization that doesn't pick their leaders anything but carefully. They're very, very precise about hiring the right person for the job. And that can make sometimes things harder, sometimes things easier. But I would really like to understand your personal introverted journey. Like, was there a specific time that you discovered that you were introverted? Did you always feel introverted? Did you have any struggles facing up? And kind of how did you break through those?
Yes, I absolutely had a lot of struggles. So even before I joined professional services, I found myself, I started in finance, and I found myself sort of moving into different areas, different teams that were related to finance. But I knew that actually I always wanted to be out there more. I wanted to be speaking to more people in the organization. So I started to choose my roles wisely. And I started to make moves in order to get me more exposure, even though it wasn't something that came natural to me. Like in one of my jobs, I had to make a lot of phone calls, and I'm sure other introverts can resonate with me when I say sometimes making phone calls is very, very tiresome. So I made those careful decisions, but it did take it a lot out of me. But it was when I became a manager in one of my first roles that I actually started to think about what it meant to be an introvert. Because, Matthew, I really thought that one of my strengths was that I could really tailor myself and my personality to different people. And I think part of that came from just being very empathetic and, trying to focus on what the other person was feeling over maybe what I was feeling. And then someone pointed out to me that actually, just by doing that, especially with one team, they'll start to question, what side of you they're getting, because they see you being different people with different sides, to different people. But actually, once I started to think about what it meant to be an introvert and how I could make sure that I felt proud of my introversion, that's where my journey started to change.
That's really powerful, I think, because I do know growing up, I met many introverted people that in a lot of ways they were chameleons. They kind of leveraged the energy of the people in the room. They tried to fit into every group. And I'd see sometimes really quiet people that I knew to be quite reserved and relaxed in their general demeanor. All of a sudden their voice would go up and they would start talking in this high octane, high energy kind of behavior just because they thought that that's what it was expected of them. And I can imagine they would have gone home absolutely exhausted and probably, if they're anything like me, really ruminate on, why did I say that? Why did I do that? Because it wasn't them being their natural authentic self. And so I think that's advice that really people should listen to in a very, very thoughtful way, that if you're out there trying to pretend that you're someone that you're not, or sharing different sides of yourself rather than your full side, your full self, you really need to take a step back and say, how do I want to show up in this world? And how do I want people to perceive me? Because when we're thinking about personal brand, we're not building a personal brand to show everybody a side of ourselves that we think they'll like, because then it won't feel authentic. And we don't want our champions to see that side and only that side of us, because they'll see it as one-dimensional and they will not support you. And then you'll feel like no one gives you a shot. And when truth is, you didn't actually give them a shot yourself. And so I'm really glad you shared that. I wanted to quickly segue to one last question. And this is become my favorite question to ask because I thought there were only going to be a few answers to this. And it turns out that everybody seems to believe that they have a different introvert's edge. And this topic's really important to me because so many organizations feel that their introverts can't excel, and most introverts feel like there's a stigma around introversion. You said yourself before this interview that a lot of people feel like introversion is a negative thing, and you know, that's terrible. So I really want to lean in to the introvert's edge, and I'd love to know what you consider your introvert's edge to be.
Yeah, great question. So my introvert's edge is that my introversion makes me a more effective problem solver. So let me explain to you how I get there. So we all know that introverts are more sensitive to the external environment because what's happening around them can really impact their internal energy, and that's why we talk about protecting it often. But what it's done for me is that it's just made me tune into other people around me more, made me more empathetic and more aware of their problems, their pain points and their challenges. And then that leads on to finding out more about the root cause behind those challenges, and then finding better, more effective and more sustainable solutions for their problems.
That's terrific. Have you found that edge comes with an Achilles heel of people expect you to be able to do that on the fly? And are you able to do that on the fly? Or do you need to find yourself or get people to give you the space you need to be able to lean into that strength?
I actually listened to one of your previous podcasts, Matthew, and the gentleman said that his introvert's edge is that he can do parallel processing. And I thought to myself, actually, that's not my edge at all. I'm the opposite. I do need a bit of time to process my thoughts, my ideas, and I come away. So after I come away from, let's say, a big workshop, a big meeting, even a one-to-one, I do my best thinking in solitude. But once I found that out, it just gave me a lot more confidence to ask for that space. So I'm able to get it and make sure that I come back with a better solution for people.
That's terrific. What about for those people that feel like they're getting asked for a solution on the fly, the people that share that edge with you, but they're in a meeting and their manager is saying, you know, you always, John, have great solutions that you come to after the meeting. I'd love for you to share your view right now so that we can move forward with your best idea. Like, what do you do in those situations? Or have you been able to figure out a way to get people to not do that?
So if they are not able to ask for that space and they're not able to, get that space that they need, I would normally respond by actually asking questions to that person. Because what you do when you ask questions is that you're still giving sort of ideas because you're explaining to them your thought process and where you're going, but you're not coming up with that solution just yet. You're digging a little bit deeper, and then in that way, actually sometimes you have come to the solution because you've asked the right questions along the way, whereas previously you would have gone away and come back with those questions. So either it's getting the space or doing the questions. I wouldn't recommend that they should just come up with any sort of solution on the fly because that's not going to help them in any shape or form.
I think that's great advice. And for us introverts that feel forced into doing that, you're going to regret answering the question on the fly that night, and you're going to ruminate over that. So that's the last thing you want to do. I mean, I am constantly saying to managers that they need to send an agenda in advance. And I've said to many, many introverts, like, if they're always getting asked questions on the fly, ask for an agenda in advance. And if there's any specific input they're looking for from you. But I love the idea of asking questions because firstly, that's really leaning into, again, like you said, an introvert's ability to empathize and actively listen, but it's also giving you that time so that your brain relaxes a little bit. In sales, we talk about the objection handling cushion. When somebody gives you an objection, there's a set thing that you say to give your brain time to kind of get out of that spasm of what am I going to say and allow you the opportunity to breathe. And I think what you've just really articulated is that that you're providing a cushion through questioning to actually allow people to get some space back in there, but also doing what they probably would have done in reflection later, instead of asking questions of themselves to look at it at every angle, they're actually asking questions of the person that asked them to look at it from all those angles as well. I think that's really, really powerful. And for those people that are listening to this and this happens to them a lot, just try it. I know that it will feel uncomfortable at the first time, but I really would stress that this is something that will probably prove itself almost straight away when you're asked a question. If you can't get an agenda, start asking questions, and my bet is you will find that the answers come to you. And what you're hearing is for Nital, that is exactly what's worked for her. So you're buying into a proven process. Nital, thank you so much for giving so much value to our audience. For those people that have never heard of you before and have really got value out of this episode, where would you suggest people find out more information about you?
So I post on LinkedIn, so you can find out a lot more like tips, tricks, and ideas, insight around this topic. But also you can contact me via my website, which is www.nital.me. So you can direct message me on LinkedIn or contact me via my website.
That's terrific. And for those people that are driving right now or, commuting, don't worry. All of those links will be in the show notes. But for today, look, thank you so much for listening to us share what we consider is necessary guidance for us introverts that perhaps in a lot of ways feel disenfranchised or the fact that we can't succeed. So thank you for tuning in, and we greatly look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Introvert's Edge podcast. Thanks, everyone. Cheers. I'm Matthew Pollard, the author of The Introvert's Edge to Networking. I'm on a mission to help introverts to be proud of who we are. For the first time, you'll learn a process for networking that feels comfortable and authentic to you as an introvert. A process that doesn't feel salesy or awkward in any way.
I saw at least half of my board members, 3 in particular that I can think of, that now are so comfortable in literally going up to people at events. All of a sudden, I can see the confidence.
Most of the networking books and literature out there really focus on hardcore tactics designed for extroverts. As introverts, we're different, and we need to embrace that. We need a system that allows us to channel our natural introverted strengths into the networking room. You will learn how to be successful at face-to-face networking and a masterful online networker on your terms.
It's beautifully written, and it provides tremendous value. So I am honored to say, folks, if you haven't looked at the book, you really need to check out this guy's book. It's excellent.
It gives you that confidence to truly be yourself, knowing that you're going to be presenting yourself in a way that is authentic and will also really resonate with the person that you're talking with.
One of the things you'll love about the Introvert's Edge to Networking is it's jam-packed full of more than 20 stories of introverts just like you. People that have likely started in much tougher spots than where you are right now, and how they've leveraged the strategies that you'll be learning to obtain phenomenal career and small business success.
I was about to give up on my business. The results started coming in right away. In fact, a year later, the Chamber of Commerce awarded me the Business of the Year.
You need to go read his book because everything he does is what people need, whether they're an introvert or not.
I've been fortunate to receive endorsements from some exceptional introverts like Neil Patel and Ivan Meisner, the founder of the world's largest networking group, BNI.
What I love about the Introvert's Edge is that it talks about the things that make an introvert successful.
The Introvert's Edge to Networking is going to destroy all of the barriers that you have around whether success in networking is possible for you.
Now I'm up to kind of 5 figures, triple my prices or more.
It was like the deals just kept coming in, and it was incredible. Like, I had never seen anything like it before.
I was able to triple my revenue, and that's happened within 6 months.
We've gone from 10 million a year to 20 million a year.
I wrote The Introvert's Edge to Networking after the success of the first in the Introvert's Edge series, which focused on sales. I decided that it was just as important, perhaps even more so, that we had a networking book that was designed to help us as introverts dominate in the networking room and in online networking that was specifically written for us. So if you're an introvert, don't delay. Head to the introvertsedge.com/networking to get access to the first chapter of my new book completely for free today.